Hello and welcome to the Roundtable. I'm your host Clement Ogaro, and this edition focuses on our public infrastructure and how to improve the standard. This important aspect of our development will be discussed by Cromwell Williams. He's the Director of Public Works, Mr. Randolph Edmead, the Director of Physical Planning and Environment, Oren Manners, who is a project analyst, and Victor Williams, who is the principal owner of Williams Architect. The question is, can we afford, or are we willing to afford the cost of keeping our infrastructure relevant to modern demands? We will find out on the other side. We'll take a break. We'll hear from our friends at Brimstone Hill. We want to say special thanks to them for sponsoring our program yet again. We want to say thanks to them, and we'll come back with our discussion.
Explore the history of St. Kitts with a visit to the Brimstone Hill Fortress National Park. This 42-acre complex of fortifications has been designated a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Upon entering the fortress, you can choose to visit the gift shop and orientation center, where you can purchase unique, high-quality items at duty-free prices, or you can look in on the Fort George Museum, which boasts a collection of military and other exhibits unrivaled in the Eastern Caribbean. The breathtaking view of Brimstone Hill includes the mountain range and a view of several other islands on a clear day, and of the Sandy Point Bay that the fortress once defended. Visit us and really experience the history of St. Kitts. This venue will also lend an indescribable ambience to your wedding or banquet. Explore the history of St. Kitts with a visit to the Brimstone Hill Fortress National Park. This 42-acre complex of fortifications has been designated a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Upon entering the fortress, you can choose to visit the gift shop and orientation center, where you can purchase unique, high-quality items at duty-free prices, or you can look in on the Fort George Museum, which boasts a collection of military and other exhibits unrivaled in the Eastern Caribbean. The breathtaking view of Brimstone Hill includes the mountain range and a view of several other islands on a clear day, and of the Sandy Point Bay that the fortress once defended. Visit us and really experience the history of St. Kitts. This venue will also lend an indescribable ambience to your wedding or banquet.
Want to get the latest news and information on demand? Check out zizonline.com. Our website is updated daily to bring you all the latest local, regional, and international news. Gone abroad and miss home? Check out zizonline.com for our live streams and uploaded local content. We're also on Facebook. Like our page and receive photos, info, and updates directly on your newsfeed. Living on the go? Then our new mobile website can work for you. Visit zizonline.com and get all the information you need on your phone's browser. zizonline.com, reaching you wherever you are.
Back to the roundtable. And as I said, we have a group of notable gentlemen here this evening who is going to help us to understand the importance of public infrastructure from, different aspects. First, though, we're going to go to Mr. Cromwell Williams. He's the Director of Public Works, and you guys are celebrating a week of activities this week. So we'll give you the opportunity now to, just let the general public know what to expect for the rest of the week, since this is your Monday night gig here on ZIZ.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Ogaro, and good night to the listening public. And first, let me also thank you and ZIZ Broadcasting for allowing us this opportunity to be on the round table. Public Works Department, as you mentioned, is celebrating a week of activities. Starting yesterday, Sunday, we worshipped at the Zion Moravian Church, and here we are tonight and as part of this panel discussion. And we are celebrating under the theme, improving the standard of our public infrastructure. I know that infrastructure might sound like a big word, and so one of the first things I would want to do is to break it down, as we will say. When we speak of public infrastructure, we're talking about basically the utilities, water, supply, electricity, our road networks. We're talking about other transportation systems such as airports and seaports, solid waste. All of these essentially are what make up the public infrastructure. As far as my domain concerns, public works department, the main one that we will be responsible for would be the road network. But I believe that we would want to touch on public infrastructure in general because it affects all of our lives. It is very important infrastructure in terms of determining our quality of life. And so tonight, I hope that we can share our various ideas as to where we are in terms of the quality and standard of our public infrastructure and some ideas as to what we can do going forward in terms of improving our public infrastructure. In terms of our week of activities, we also have planned for this week, Wednesday and Thursday, and open days. So we are inviting the public, including school children, to come in to our offices on Wellington Road, where they can see some of what we do behind the scenes. And then as the week progresses, we are hoping to climax on Saturday with a fun and sports day. And we're also happy to have joining us at the weekend, which is the WIT weekend, our counterparts from Montserrat will be coming over to have some fellowship with us on this coming weekend.
You're not going to build anything?
No, they're just coming, to network and to meet and so that we can establish, some working relations. So that would climax our week basically on Saturday. So we're glad for this opportunity to bring public works into the public spotlight, because I believe that it is important for us to engage the stakeholders, the persons who use the roads that we build and maintain, and to hear from the general public. And it also gives us an opportunity to foster closer working relations internally amongst our staff.
All right, Mr. Williams, thank you very much for that introduction. Of course, we're familiar with the term, public works, but I guess at the end of the night, hopefully people will get an understanding of what we're talking about and how important it is to maintain the facilities that you talk about, the road network, and how important it is for us in an expanding global economy. I'm going to move now to Mr. Ed Mead. You're the Director of Physical Planning and Environment. I know you said you should shade the environment a little bit tonight. So we're going to talk about physical planning. And I mean, what do you guys do at the department as a way of introduction to the public?
Okay, good night to the listening and the viewing public. And let me say thank you very much, Mr. Ogaro and Mr. Williams, for inviting me to be a part of this program, representing the Department of Physical Planning and Environment, focusing this evening on physical planning. Now you ask, what do we do? The Department of Physical Planning and Environment, we are part of the Ministry of Sustainable Development. Our role basically is to coordinate physical development activities on St. Kitts, ensure that standards are adhered to, ensure that safety in terms of building or physical infrastructure is maintained. Basically, that's what we do.
Okay, so it seems as if the you play a role along with the public works in terms of, and I know, Mr. Williams, you mentioned road specifically, but I know you guys do, different structures, and so you would be the man to tell them, well, hey, this road is not going to work in this particular area.
Certainly, because part of our role is to determine what goes where, to determine land use planning, to determine how things are rolled out physically on the ground. So, in as much as Mr. Williams Cromwell is responsible for building roads, those roads must be built to specifications which are set by us at physical planning.
Okay, good. I sense that you're probably going to get a lot of questions tonight. But that's of course, that's the role of the show. And to our listeners and viewers, of course, you can give us a call back. You can give us a call later on at 466-2666, of course. Now I'm going to go to Mr. Manners. You're a project analyst also in the Ministry of Sustainable Development. So, Mr. Ed Mead here, he tells us where to build the road, and then he puts you in charge of the project. I don't know if I have it right, but
Okay. Well, not quite. Good evening, everyone. My name is Oren Manners, and I am also from the Ministry of Sustainable Development. I represent the Department of Economic Affairs and Public Sector Investment Planning. Our role as it relates to projects, public infrastructure, more has to do with development planning, economic planning, and what we call public sector investment planning. I think the public has to understand that public infrastructure is not viewed in isolation as isolated projects. We try to stress that all projects, whether infrastructure projects or other types of projects, are viewed as a whole, as a comprehensive investment program. So each country would have its own public sector investment program. And that is where we specialize in overseeing and managing the public sector investment program. So in looking at the PSIP, which is the short term for it, we ensure that the PSIP is linked to the country's national development plan, and that it fits within the fiscal situation of the country. That is to say, you cannot implement public infrastructure projects if the cost cannot be accommodated by the government. So we, at our department, separate from what Mr. Edmead's department does, is to look at the projects as a whole, not just individually, and to ensure that they fit within the development context of the country, and that the cost of these projects are adequately managed.
So you don't only deal with the structure, as you say, you deal with the project on a whole, so this involves financing and whether it's feasible or not for the country.
That is correct. The PSIP, the Public Sector Investment Program, which includes all capital projects, it also has to look at what are the financing options. There are a few different financing options we look at for the projects. It also establishes criteria to determine which projects are recommended for this year, which public infrastructure projects, and which can wait till next year or the year after, etc. So it is a program that looks at everything, the feasibility of the project and the financing of the projects, etc.
All right. Well, thank you very much. And of course, we're going to have a lot to say about that. I think I screwed up your title, Mr. Victor Williams. So let me say we have Victor Williams. He's architect and planner, and he's the principal owner of Williams Architectural. I think I got that right. So you're here in a private capacity, of course, but there's lots of private entities that are pretty interested in what goes on with our public infrastructure. What's your role?
Thank you. All right, first let me say good evening to the viewing audience and the listening audience as well. And to say that it's always a pleasure to be at ZIZ, the nation's information fountain. And I think I should also commend Cromwell for the week of activities. It's bringing quite a lot of focus onto public works. I commend you for that. I am now functioning purely and fully in a private sector capacity, so I've been unshackled so I could speak very freely. But having been involved in development since 1975, I've seen quite a lot of changes. But primarily, as a private sector service provider, my role and our role is to provide development. But it has to be done in the context of the development parameters that are established by the authorities, and in most cases it would be by the planning unit. So there has to be that relationship between the planning unit and the private sector service provider, whether it will be an engineer, an architect, a planner, whatever service you provide towards the infrastructural development. So we have to have that close relationship. We have to stay fairly knowledgeable with what is permissible. We have to also stay ahead of the curve with what new things are happening that would affect public infrastructure. We have to provide our services and developments at least equal to or better than the minimum standards, because remember, whereas, for example, in some government projects, you might be attracting perhaps the affordable housing. Sometimes the service providers would be attracting high-end clients, so you certainly will not be providing the minimum infrastructural services. And the other thing we have to do as well as local private sector service providers is to try to attract investors to our country by being knowledgeable of what they want and also offering that higher level of standard. Now, we're going to be talking about infrastructure, and I do not intend to dilate too much in the opening section, but I'm hoping that we'll have the opportunity to talk about some of the more basic but very necessary services, the water, the electricity, the roads, apart from the others, because I have quite a lot of I want to throw out a number of challenges for us to discuss. So I prefer the dialogue, so thanks for giving me the opening.
Good. At least you didn't say questions, because I'm the one asking the questions tonight. But no, okay, what we're going to do now, we're at the bottom of the hour, so we're going to take a break. We'll hear from our friends at Brimstone Hill. And again, we want to say special thanks to the folks there for sponsoring the roundtable for this season. When we come back, Cromwell, we're going to go to you and we're going to dig deeper into, things like cost and how does that relate to our situation here in St. Kitts. So we'll be back with the roundtable.
Explore the history of St. Kitts with a visit to the Brimstone Hill Fortress National Park. This 42-acre complex of fortifications has been designated a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Upon entering the fortress, you can choose to visit the gift shop and orientation center, where you can purchase unique, high-quality items at duty-free prices. Or you can look in on the Fort George Museum, which boasts a collection of military and other exhibits unrivaled in the Eastern Caribbean. The breathtaking view of Brimstone Hill includes the mountain range and a view of several other islands on a clear day, and of the Sandy Point Bay that the fortress once defended. Visit us and really experience the history of St. Kitts. This venue will also lend an indescribable ambience to your wedding or banquet.
Want to get the latest news and information on demand? Check out zizonline.com. Our website is updated daily to bring you all the latest local, regional, and international news. Gone abroad and miss home? Check out zizonline.com for our live streams and uploaded local content. We're also on Facebook. Like our page and receive photos, info, and updates directly on your newsfeed. Living on the go? Then our new mobile website can work for you. Visit zizonline.com and get all the information you need on your phone's browser. zizonline.com, reaching you wherever you are.
Welcome back to the roundtable, and we're going to get into the meat of our discussion. Of course, Mr. Williams Cromwell, as you said earlier, public infrastructure sounds like a big word. Well, big words may mean big money as well. And you guys are responsible for the road network in St. Kitts. Now, there's been a lot of expansion over several years now. How is public works financed? Where do you get money from to do these projects? I know you operate, as part of a government department or government ministry, but how do you convince your principals that hey, I need money to build, a road in St. Peter's?
Okay. The cost of constructing new roads is quite significant, as one would expect. I think that the last major road that was built, which is the F.T. Williams Highway, I think that was somewhere in the vicinity of around about probably $30 million, if I'm not mistaken. That is quite a bit of money. I think that would have been financed through a loan from the Caribbean Development Bank. And most infrastructure of that nature usually would be financed by the government through loans. I think gone are the days when we would have gotten grants, which is free money basically to undertake major capital projects or infrastructural developments. And so it's a loan, which means that we have to pay it back. And we know that we are a country that has been significantly indebted. But we have to undertake such infrastructural development. It is a must, because those of us who use, say, the F.T. Williams Highway, which was before known as the West Bastia Bypass Road, would be amazed to see how much traffic that highway now carries in just a few years that it has been constructed. And so it means that perhaps some commendation ought to be given to the persons who had the foresight to see the need for the construction of that bypass road. And so we have to now look beyond that, further into the future, to the day when we might start seeing congestion on that road. And so we have to begin to look into the future as to possible alternatives, possible solutions, as we go and as we develop. So you raise the issue of the cost, and I say yes, cost is always going to be a significant factor in terms of determining what infrastructure construction is pursued in terms of priority. And Orion can perhaps elaborate more in terms of the prioritization of expenditure. For instance, do you construct the F.T. Williams Highway for, say, $30 million versus upgrading maybe some health facility or some sporting facility or some other infrastructure. And so that is the nature of where we have to collaborate in terms of public works, sustainable development, Ministry of Finance, and we all have to sit around the table and look at these prioritization of expenditure.
So Aaron, you're the guy who does the finance. You're the guy who determines whether I can drive on a 2-lane road or 1-lane road based on the cost of it.
Right. Well, I think Mr. Williams is correct. It was financed by CDB loan. I think that was maybe 5 years ago or thereabout. I don't think we can downplay the benefits of the road. It has, been a benefit for everyone in terms of getting to work on time and, easing the congestion in Bastille. And also, the quality of the road, it's better so that, it helps to preserve your vehicle a little longer.
Yeah. But what I want to ask, though, is there any kind of assessment done? I know you mentioned the amount of people who use the road. It was studies or assessments to show us exactly, okay, so how is this benefiting? Look at the difference between one period to the next. This is how many vehicles are traveling, on this road, because I don't know. I still think that everybody, I drive on it all the time, but I think everybody still goes through Bastille on a Friday.
If I could just jump in here, though, because I know under all requirements, especially for international funding, there has to be this pre-feasibility and feasibility study, and you have to carry out these traffic studies as to the anticipated present load, where the congestions are, and what difference it's going to make, and there's scientific ways for it to be done. So it is mandatory that this is carried out. But something Cromwell said that piqued my interest, because he's saying, looking forward, in the future, the actual cost of providing infrastructure, roads, is going to keep going up simply because a lot of the material is imported. Now, we know that we have, St. Kitts has one of the most impressive settlement patterns in the OECS. We had, at one time, we had perhaps just 23 settlements, each between 1.5 miles to 2 miles between each one. But as you know, we have expanded with housing. Okay. And the sector
so settlements, you mean villages?
Yeah, yes, villages. And suburbia.
You took me back there for a little bit, but all right.
So what is happening is that with each expansion of the villages, there's more and more demand for this infrastructure, and the minimum infrastructure required is not just for roads, it's roads, paved roads, water and electricity.
Correct.
So those three have to penetrate all of these developments, and it's very costly. Now, given the fact that we have a finite amount of land, and given the fact that we have, over quite some time now, everybody's getting their own house lot, when you look at the total quantity of land required and infrastructure required, it's fairly expensive. So if you can provide more housing along a shorter stretch of road which has the electricity, which has the water, then you're actually saving. But what it means is that the time has come since 1970s for us to begin to think differently about the type of housing we offer. The country really cannot afford one lot per person. We will literally run out of housing land. But not only that, the cost to provide infrastructure to all of these expansion settlements is very expensive. And if you don't begin to bring houses closer together, what is going to happen is that you'll have to increase the price people pay for land. And although it is heavily subsidized right now, the government really cannot continue to subsidize at a very high cost. So we have to change the way we do things, basically, that's what I'm saying, so that we could reduce the cost of infrastructure, because we cannot control the importation costs. But we can control the way we provide infrastructure so that more people can get infrastructure at the same price. That's what I'm saying.
It's a very interesting concept. as it relates to moving people closer together.
It has to happen.
Meaning that you're, well, I mean, you know, if you travel to the U.S., you'll see probably a lot of that happening, sometimes without even fences in between. What I want to do, I want to come back to you, Randolph, about, because I'm sure people have this question. So, and I don't know, maybe Mr. Williams, you can help us out with this as well. So we build a new road, and you know, everybody says, well, okay, we build a freeway, but we're still on one lane. What determines, who determines whether or not, okay, so if we build this road in 2005, in 2020 we're going to have X amount of cars, means that we probably need a couple more lanes on these freeways. Is it cost only, or?
Well, as Victor mentioned, before we would have designed and proceeded to construct a new highway, we would have carried out traffic studies. So that would have indicated to us the likely usage that you would get on that road. And I suppose it would have also enabled us to make projections as to what would be the likely growth of traffic over the years. Now, what I observed while I was a student at university in Trinidad was that they had this particular highway, and it was maybe about 3 lanes, but after a while you saw them putting in additional lanes. Now, I am hopeful that we will take on board the need for possible expansion of our highways in the future. I mean, if we don't do it, and in some instances it is already too late, you know, where our island main road goes to certain villages. And so what we're going to have to do is to look at bypasses, as we've bypassed West Bastia, the West Bastia bypass. It means that for some of our villages, as our traffic increase, we're going to have to look at bypassing some of these villages because there's no room for expansion. Yeah, but to answer your question in short, I mean, that is what it boils down to. There is going to come a time when the volume of traffic on the road is going to necessitate insertion of additional lanes. Otherwise, you're going to have a congestion. The travel time from Old Road to Bastia is going to become just, you know, unreasonable, and so we're going to be forced to find engineering solutions.
Just to launch off to pick up from a point from Mr. Williams, that is where physical planning comes in also. The ability to project, I mean, to try and determine what you will need in the future. Proper planning dictates that you do not build for the now, you build with excess capacity. So if you're building a road, you do not build for today's level of traffic, but you build in mind for it to accept increase in traffic, maybe 5-10 years onwards. So that is where the planning aspect comes in. Mr. Williams also mentioned the aspect of bypassing. I mean, that is indeed one of the things that we at physical planning have to think seriously about, because in terms of our road expansion network, as he correctly said, I mean, within these villages.
Yeah, like Old Road, Sandy Point, for example, and many more of them. You can't really do anything except you start moving houses.
Yes, I mean, so one has to start thinking about, I mean, taking those roads into areas where you have the space for expansion and bypass those areas. So if you don't have anything to do in Old Road, then you just drive past.
There's another thing I would like to throw in here. As you know, we are now moving away from centralization to decentralized economic development in the Southeastern Peninsula, Whitegate, etc., etc. Now, as development continues, you notice we're getting heavier and heavier vehicles,
Correct.
moving heavy stuff, and the roads are not designed for this. And there's a school of thought now that perhaps we now begin to think of our railway system in a different capacity as well. Beef it up so that you could send maybe some of the heavy stuff through your railroad system, as it's done in many countries, so that you could save your roads. So in future planning, this is one of the things that Randolph Edmeade would be looking at, right? Whether or not we can utilize our railroad more, not just for the scenic railway, but also to move very heavy equipment very quickly across the country, across the White Gate, across any other development in any other areas, and save the roads. Because the roads simply cannot take, I see some huge, I can't say the word description, but huge vehicles could barely pass on these roads. I'm wondering also if we shouldn't consider some regulation as to what size vehicles could come on our roads, because the roads cannot be expanded in some areas.
That is going to become necessary in the very near future.
Well, yeah, because I mean, you see some, as you say, I mean, some of these big trucks that's taking boulders and things back and forth, and not only that, they become a traffic hazard as well too, for people who are traversing the road. And I know you talk about the rail, but I know in some states in the U.S. what they do is they have highways or freeways where, I mean, you know, 18-wheelers and stuff are diverted around the city as opposed to, you know, going through the city. Aaron, you wanted to get in on this as well.
Yeah. Well, you asked about the financing earlier, so I would just follow up on that. You mentioned the road was financed by a loan. Loans as a means of financing capital projects, public infrastructure, is not a very popular mechanism at this moment. The government has been, over the past years, has been focusing on reducing the debt of the country, as we all know. So, whereas when the bypass road was built and it was financed by a loan, that is not very feasible right now. So it has largely been taken out of the scheme of things in terms of financing public infrastructure.
Okay. So what would replace it if you take out loans?
Well,
something that is a vacuum.
You have.
Well, you'd have to find some friendly governments or
You've taken out grants, you've taken out loans, so.
You have grants, you have government revenue, but the capital budget right now, as it is not very focused on loans.
Okay. What about standards? We get that question all the time as it relates to, okay, you know, is this road built with a particular standard, or is this building safe, or is it in the right location? How do you police standards at Sustainable?
At
physical planning, yes.
Physical
I'm sorry.
planning. Okay, now, in terms of infrastructure and the role of physical planning in infrastructure, that physical planning is really responsible for the implementation of our national physical development plan, which is basically our land use document. And we are also responsible for implementing the provisions of the Development Control and Planning Act of 2000. Now, using those two instruments, you talk about standards, that the Development Control and Planning Act, it governs all development activities, all physical development activities, and these activities are guided by what we call our development regulations, or what people know as the building codes. They speak to a wide array of activities, the manner in which you build your house, the steel you use, the setback from the public main road, things of that nature. In terms of the physical infrastructure aspect, there is another document which we use, which we refer to as the public infrastructure guidelines, which is referred to as the PIGS document. The planning infrastructure guidelines, sorry. And those are the ones which set out, that is the one which set out all of the specifications in terms of standards.
So do you, physically go out to look at this stuff?
Yes, of course we do. We have a team of officers, building inspectors. Before anything is built, you must submit a plan for approval. Okay, and that is where we start ensuring that the standards are outlined. And then after that plan is approved, then we have our people to police to ensure that what is approved is what is actually done on the ground. Yes, so we do supervision.
Okay, because that I think is a critical part of the ongoing development. Simply because you hear people complain about this, about this stuff. There's been a lot of course, controversial issues in the past, and so that's the reason why. Hence, the reason I asked the question about inspection. And I don't know how the inspections are done. Whether it's done like the traffic police who stays behind the hill and wait for you to speed up the up the hill. Cromwell, I'm gonna. Well, go ahead. You wanted to add something to this.
Yes, in relation to what Mr. Edmeade just mentioned, the fact that there are building and infrastructural standards and codes, which we too as engineers, if we're going to design a highway or a building or any piece of infrastructure, we have standards that we would use. We have, for instance, the British standards, which if you studied engineering in England, you might use the British standards. If you studied in Canada, you might use the Canadian standards, or some other developed country.
And all of these are accepted here in St. Kitts Nevis?
Generally speaking, yes. Yes, and they're pretty much international standards. But the issue I wanted to touch on is that even though we use these standards in the design, and once it comes to construction and implementation, and that is where we have to ensure that what is sent to Mr. Edmeade's office on paper and is stamped approved, that is what happens out there on the ground. And that is where supervision and inspection comes in. Because a lot of times, the problem is not that something was not properly designed and approved, but when it came to the implementation on the ground, someone could have dropped the ball. And so you have problems in that what actually translates out there on the ground.
But what happens in that situation, though? Do you have them tear down the building, or?
We have the power to.
Because the law gives you the authority to.
The act, the law gives the authority. To first to do that. But we try not to reach that point.
Okay.
We try not to reach that point, but we do have the authority to do it. What we strive for, we strive more for compliance than to use the big stick approach and to go and tear down voluntary compliance. Let me add, because I know it's going to come, that it is not all that we are able to catch. Some slip through, but we try our best to catch what we can and to give the necessary guidance to ensure that things don't turn out all bad.
And this must be very important to you, Victor, as an architectural firm, because, I mean, of course, you don't want, to have a construction company, cheat their way through building a building, and then it becomes a health hazard or something of that nature down the line.
But for us, it's very important for us to ensure that we follow the building codes. For one simple reason, as a professional firm, we have to have professional liability insurance. If we don't design properly and there's an issue with design, our clients could sue us. So it behooves us to be very familiar with the do's and don'ts, the regulations. So the bigger firms, really and truly, you would hardly find them trying to dodge the requirements. We tend to adhere to the requirements. The other thing too is that, and I would agree that with Mr. Edmead Randolph, that it's more about getting people to comply and understand why you're doing what you're doing. And I know that the planning unit has reached out on a number of occasions to advise people about what the requirements are. You will always find cheaters. It happens in anything you do, and they know they're doing it. But the thing is, it's always best to try to catch them early, because you never hear about the successes, for example, of the plan unit. You only hear about the failures, but there have been many successes. And over the years, I know that the planning unit has guided a lot of persons, and they act as a sort of advisory. Sometimes when people come to it, because I have been involved in doing seminars on how to own a home through the entire OECS. And I know quite often that people come for advice. They go to the planning unit, and the planning unit gives that advice. So they also function as an advisory arm to guide people. So people have no excuse, really. But I wanted to just take one thing more about building, because we talk about infrastructure, and we haven't really spoken about the public building as an infrastructure. As we know, it is an infrastructure. I think one of the challenges that I have as an observer is that for some strange reason, the public buildings, there's a challenge in maintaining them at a certain level. I've seen that quite often. And I'm thinking that maybe it might be, the time has come maybe to think of using a more durable type of material when you're dealing with public buildings. Now, when you look at a public building, quite often what you're seeing is a building that requires painting. Now, the paints that we normally use on public buildings is like a 3-year paint. And afterwards it starts to wash. Now, perhaps the architects, the designers may need to consider using a non-paint on public buildings, and use perhaps just highlighters on buildings so that they still look attractive, in that way they would not look the way they look right now. Because collectively, when you pull back and you look at a number of public buildings collectively, it is not the most pleasant sight. But I suspect the approach to using public buildings is to, let's say for example you used a plaster that doesn't require paint, and then in only certain areas you use a small amount of paint. You could then use even a 10-year paint or 15-year paint, because when Cromwell has to go on and maintain it, he's only using 10 gallons of paint on a building instead of using 100 gallons. So it reduces its maintenance costs. But I'm thinking that we have to do things differently to save, because money is the problem. The problem is no money. And so we have to find ways to do things differently, and that's my theme. You really have to find ways to do things differently.
All right, so we're gonna come back to you, Mr. Edmead. We're at the top of the 9 o'clock hour, so we're gonna take a break, and we'll hear again from the fine folks at Brimstone Hill, and we'll come back. When we come back, we'll also have you join the conversation at 466-2666. And just let me make the clarification, of course, for people who are listening on the radio. Normally you're accustomed to join us on 465-2555, but tonight we're in TV, so it's 466-2666. We'll be back on the roundtable.
Explore the history of St. Kitts with a visit to the Brimstone Hill Fortress National Park. This 42-acre complex of fortifications has been designated a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Upon entering the fortress, you can choose to visit the gift shop and orientation center, where you can purchase unique, high-quality items at duty-free prices. Or you can look in on the Fort George Museum, which boasts a collection of military and other exhibits unrivaled in the Eastern Caribbean. The breathtaking view of Brimstone Hill includes the mountain range and a view of several other islands on a clear day and of the Sandy Point Bay that the fortress once defended. Visit us and really experience the history of St. Kitts. This venue will also lend an indescribable ambience to your wedding or banquet.
Guess who's back? Guess who's back? Guess who's back?
Who that? Pinocchio?
But the surprise, with sports and entertainment lives. Can't improvise cause there's so much inside. Fashion the style, word on the street will make you smile. People show, youth awareness, interest in just fashion cause it, and many more that you cannot resist. For young and old, it's not my show, that's how we roll. The people show, now everybody tune in on time. On Wednesdays at night.
Welcome back to the round table. And of course, you know, during the breaks, we have all these discussions of points that we want to, some of them we can't bring to you. Okay, so, but RNU, you wanted to jump in on Victor's point about the maintenance.
Yes. Well, it's an issue that we observe from our department in terms of the maintenance of public facilities. That includes, you know, offices and could be stadiums, community centers, etc. And, you know, it's a recurring issue. We have discussions with Public Works about this matter. So in the prioritization of projects and assessing projects that are eligible to be financed, one thing that we look at is has the ministry that is proposing the project, have they taken into account the budget for maintaining the facility in year 2, in year 3, in year 10? Because the tendency before was just to put forward a project and, you know, build the facility, and then it's there.
And what happens,
and what happens after
that?
Right.
If the community doesn't have, you know, the money or whatever, the you know, togetherness to repair it, then you have that issue. And of course, it leads me to, I mean, you know, dealing with our communities, because, and Cromwell, I'm going to go back to you to stress the importance of the infrastructure as it relates to our communities. Aaron just mentioned community centers. Now, where you're going to meet if the community center has fallen apart. And so the community plays a big role in what you do as well. Once you put the initial structure down, then of course big repairs, you'll come in and do it, but something, you know, simple stuff, the community needs to get involved.
Yes, what I have observed is that over the last years, the stock of government buildings have increased significantly in the last decade or so. We have constructed quite a number of new facilities, whether it is sports stadia, community centers, even daycare centers. We have expanded quite a number of school buildings, facilities. But I think it's also unfortunate that I don't think that we have kept a pace in terms of the maintenance and upkeep of these facilities.
Okay, Mr. Williams, well, I'm going to hold. We did say that the callers can join us, and they are ready and willing to join us at 466-2666. So what we're going to do, we'll take a few calls at a time. We'll take notes, and then we'll go through the calls. Good evening, caller. Welcome to the roundtable.
Yes, good evening to all of the panelists.
Good evening.
Yes, I'm glad Mr. Victor Williams is there. This is Sylvian Henry.
Hello, Sylvie.
Yes, now let's start with the first hazard. Right next to the government headquarters is the building in which he and I worked, which has been condemned. I have no idea why anybody's in it. You will notice that the columns, I see that they're now putting some boards, but the building has begun to drop, you know what I mean? Fall into the street. Has anybody recommended that the building be taken down? That's one. Because it is a serious threat, you know. One is there, one of our nice tourists walking down there and a piece of the blocks or whatever, or the colonnade drop on them. We put it down the next day. Now, the other issue has to do with the Newtown seawall. I have been complaining about it. It was built to give some protection to people living in Newtown. But if you were to walk across Newtown, especially the area from Kenneth's Dive Center all the way up, it has corroded where you now have holes in it. Some sections have fallen down. And some cases they tap in, right? So right now it is more a threat to me, because if the sea was to come up, which it does, because I have seen the seawater up on George Street, and the wall there in its present condition does not offer anybody in Newtown comfort. And I have asked that something be done to it, maybe run some blocks in front of it. If you can't afford to take it down or do something, that seawall needs repairing. Now, the next issue is fire escape on these buildings. Fire escape and entrance. I noticed 3-story buildings going up with no lift. I mean, buildings that you have to go and do business in. You know? The buildings have no lift. Once you pass 2 flooring, to me, you should have something to get people up there, because it limits your access at a certain age. So I don't want to think about that.
All right. Thank you very much for your call, raising some very interesting points. We do have another call, so we'll go straight to that caller. Welcome, caller.
A pleasant good evening to everyone.
Good evening.
Yeah, I'm hearing some words: infrastructure, codes, and compliance. My question around those words, right? I'm trying to build something, right? And I go to a politician and I decide I'm going to build a certain area in St. Kitts. The people them at the department know the codes and so on. But because I'm a friend of a politician, I decide that I want to build this area. Does the department step in and stick to the gun that that person cannot build here? Because I know a vexing issue in St. Kitts is a building on the beach. Thanks. Take care. Bye.
All right. Thanks for your call. We do have another caller at this point. Good evening, caller. Welcome to the roundtable.
Hi, good evening.
Good evening.
All right, good evening to the panelists as well, and you, Mr. Moderator. My question sort of was before, but follows on from what the callers said before. We're talking about public infrastructure, but I know sometimes we dance around the issue of codes and standards, and especially as it has to do with international building codes and life safety codes. We are marketing ourselves as a tourism destination, and obviously public infrastructure is the first thing that a lot of these tourists and overseas visitors are going to come into contact with. But what do we have our own codes that we are following locally, or are we being governed by international building codes or international life safety codes as it comes to buildings, or the buildings do not have pathways for the disabled or persons who are in wheelchairs, or the buildings do not have, as the caller said before, fire escapes or safety measures being put in place when they're building? And do we really have someone who, and as the panelists would know, what they call an AHJ, or authority having jurisdiction, in St. Kitts, who goes, and whether it's a individual or it's a corporation or even if it's a government, who goes in as a neutral person and goes in and says, well, this is not by code, this is not by standard. There are no safety measures in place. There are smoke detectors, fire detectors, smoke suppression stuff in place. Is there any thought of putting anybody in place like that? Because in the U.S., you cannot occupy a building if the AHJ or the person who is having jurisdiction does not approve and have that building passed to say that it is safe for public occupancy or public use. So I'm trying to find out, because I am actually studying along those lines. So I'm trying to find out whether it is that there is a need for somebody who is doing that, or if there is somebody in place, or there are thoughts of putting that in place where you have somebody who is neutral, not government, not politically inclined or whatever, somebody who has a job to go in and say, this building is safe, this building is not safe, you need to do whatever you need to do and come back in another 2 weeks for an inspection for this building to be passed.
Okay. All right, caller. Thank you very much for raising. Thank you very much for raising an important point. We're going to take one more call for now, and then we'll, start talking about some of the ideas the callers have raised. Good evening, caller. Welcome to the round table.
Hello. Good evening.
Good evening.
Yes, my question is in regards to the wastewater fluids in Bastille. I notice that a lot of them are open to the air, and they have, at times, I don't know, buildings that release, I don't know, effluents or so on, and they create like a smell in certain parts of Bastille. Are those gutters or wastewater fluids, slated for improvement, or just that a feature of the town of Bastille?
All right, caller. Thank you very much for your input on the program tonight. So we got a bunch of different ideas. Victor, your friend and former co-worker.
Well, I want to thank Sylvain for calling in. I suspect Sylvain signaled...
My former teacher too.
Yes. We always still get along very well. I think Sylvain singled me out because she thinks that I'm still the chairman of Planning and Development Control. I'm actually just a private sector citizen, but I will still attempt to answer, but in my private sector capacity. The building that Sylvain refers to, I am in total and complete agreement with her that it needs to come down.
Which one are we referring to? The building on the lower side?
The one that we're planning, it's just one building south of...
So that's where Consumer Affairs is housed at this...
Planning used to be above there at one time.
Okay. Yes.
Sylvain is correct, but I'm not even so worried about the tourists. I'm really worried about our own local people.
Mm-hmm.
A decision has to be made to take it down. And so, Sylvain, you won't get any opposition from me on that one. Total agreement. The issue with the Newtown Sea Wall, over a period of time, these revetments really need to be repaired. And I think, again, public works will have to determine on its priority list where that comes in. That's a policy issue. I know that there are a number of things that need to be done. There's been a talk about a proper underground drainage system for the entire city. The gentleman spoke about these open drains, and we know we need to move away from these open drains into something better. But to answer the three from Sylvain, and then I could let somebody else talk about the other, the building, yes, the Newtown Sea Wall, yes. Now, in terms of, I just need to correct Sylvain on one issue. The lift or elevator is not required for 2 stories. It's required for 4 and above, and that's international. And so we try to follow the international standards. So any building that's 3 stories, a lift is optional. But I do agree that more and more we need to take into consideration the provisions for the disabled. And I know that it has been happening more and more. The planning department is giving more consideration for provisions for the disabled.
It is a requirement.
That is correct.
a requirement for approval of
So,
all public buildings.
so I would just touch on those three, and I would leave it to perhaps Randy to talk about the issue of the codes. And I think Mr. Brown, I recognize his voice, so I'm allowed to call his name. He's a good friend of mine, who spoke about whether or not there are codes for the fire protection. But I would just want to say quickly that a lot of what he speaks about, we have not elevated ourselves to that level yet. Although actually our building codes are the best in the OECS. Let me say it again. Our building codes are the best in the OECS. And I traveled the entire OECS. So I know. I've been doing this for 14 years in the entire OECS. But that doesn't mean we cannot sit back on our laurels, because, you know, we have been attracting quite a lot of direct foreign investment. We have to continually upgrade. And what we've been telling a lot, as I understand, we tell a lot of the developers, use the higher standards. And so a lot of the developers who are coming have been using higher standards, because our standards are not high enough. For example, it is not mandatory to put in a sprinkler system. But so you would not find an investor, a local person putting in a sprinkler system, because it's cost. So we have to begin to balance all of these things. But yes, I would say that we need to reach that point where we are actually upgrading our minimum standards, but not upgrading it so rapidly at the expense of our own local people who then can't afford these things. So we have to find that balance.
Okay, very important. Mr. Emid, you wanted to get in?
Just to add that, I mean, in terms of the building codes that we use, they came out of the OECS harmonized building codes, and incidentally, St. Kitts and Nevis was the first to have implemented these codes. And so that is something that we should pat ourselves on the back for. Now, in terms of requirements, safety requirements, fire escape and all of those things, we do, I mean, they are not mandatory at this point in time. But let me say at this point in time that the Development Control and Planning Board, that is the authority which police standards, okay, and development requirements. So what happens is that as the board see, I mean, the need for certain requirements, certain features to be in our building code, the board has the right to make the decision to have these things implemented, because we know development is not static.
So
it changes.
So in order to change the code, I mean, you don't have to go to the parliament or anything like that. This is done from the board level. How does that work?
Well, it has to get approval, yes.
From the
yeah, but in terms of development, I mean, the changes, we put them together, and then the Minister of Development must sign off on them.
Okay. More than likely, go through the cabinet to get the approval and stuff like that.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. There's a point that a gentleman raised about going to his politicians and asking them to allow him to build in a particular area. Let me just say that from what I understand, and of course I have to remember I'm no longer chairman, but I have found it very important a point for the director of planning or the chairman of the board to liaise with quite a lot of these decision makers who don't understand planning but who still want to have some sort of input, because it minimizes the conflict that you'll have where John Brown wants to build near a gut. And he might go to a politician, and the politician, sure man, go ahead. But what he's doing is, one, is setting a precedence and is creating problems. And so you have to have that first of all, you have to be able to smell development, smell construction, as we call it. So you want to stop it at the very, very, very early stage. Because once a guy has spent 20,000, 30,000, it's very difficult to stop it at that point. So what I'm saying is that these things will happen. In any country they will happen. But what you have to do is to minimize the occurrence of these things happening by having a direct contact and relationship with other decision makers who might be encroaching on your authority, but on your territory. But the Development Control and Planning Board is the authority apart from Cabinet and Minister of Development. But these things will happen.
Is there any penalty for I mean, you know, ignoring the code?
There are penalties, but let me point out here that there are a number of actors involved in enforcement. I mean, we need or we request assistance from the allied agencies in terms of assisting with enforcement. So when it comes to the penalty phase, that is where you go into the court. That is where we now depend on the legal system, the government legal department, to assist us in putting our case together in terms of, I mean, getting these things go through. And a requirement of all of our enforcement procedures is that copies of our enforcement letters are sent to the legal department for us to get assistance. We do not have that expertise. So there are fines, there are penalties, but that is in another realm. And that is where we need beefing up.
And in terms, somebody mentioned, you know, a fire escape and stuff like that. Does the fire and safety, do they have a role to play as well?
Yes, in fact, the Development Control and Planning Board, how it was comprised, I mean, last time is that we had the fire chief sitting on the board, and the fire chief was responsible for ensuring that all of these aspects are in place in the plans, especially for public buildings.
And Mr. Williams, somebody talked about the smelly wastewater in Bastille.
Okay.
How do we get rid of that? But you can comment on any of the other callers.
The smelly wastewater, yes, it is something that I have observed myself, and I'm very concerned about. Unfortunately, what I find is that a lot of times we as public servants or civil servants, we seem not to be very proactive, and I am pointing the finger at myself. Unfortunately, it seems like too often we wait for the politicians to call us and say, go and deal with this or go and deal with that, when we are the ones who went away to study a particular discipline and we're supposed to be the authority in these areas. It is true that we might have a certain solution in mind, but we might not have the final decision whether or not to pursue this particular area. We don't control the purse to a large extent. But I think what is needed in a lot of instances to actually improve the infrastructure in our country is for certain persons to be more proactive and to step up and really take ownership and responsibility for improving our infrastructure. I also want to mention with regards to the building below government headquarters and the Newtown seawall. Now, this to me shows the importance of the public being able to reach us, because if you take the instance with the Newtown seawall, this is something that I would not have been privy to or aware of. And so there needs to be that relationship where the public, you know, is confident that when they see something that needs attention, they know who to turn to. And that is a serious issue, because a lot of times persons would tell you they get in the runaround. They call one department and they say, this is not my area. And so they have to call 15 different persons before they can find out who really is supposed to be the person who is responsible for this. And so beyond this is the bigger issue of persons taking responsibility. Right. We have to get past the mindset that the government service is so compartmentalized that people are just have on their blinders. This is my little area and this is all I'm concerned about. So if I see something, I'm public works, but I see something that's really environment, I don't take the initiative or the ownership to contact Mr. Edmead and say, Mr. Edmead, I observe so-and-so happening.
Or follow whatever it is through close to the end of the project.
Persons working for the government or it is private citizens, I think it is very important that all of us begin to take responsibility and take ownership of our country, of our infrastructure, and find out who is the person you need to contact. I suppose in the absence of that, people call the politicians. Right. and it works to some extent, it does work, but it has its limitations as well.
Okay, and I'm going to let you go ahead. I was just just about to warn the callers that, if we have any more callers who have questions or concerns, they can come in at 466-2666. Go ahead, Victor.
I'm thinking as Cromwell began to shift towards people taking responsibility, I know Cromwell is Mr. Roads and civil works and so on, but there's a very important infrastructure that we haven't dealt with much tonight, although it's equally, I can't say the most important in my estimate. That's water. Now, what concerns me is the fact that, as an observer, is that we now have the possibility of another 4,000 to 5,000 new family homes, because there are 4,000 to 5,000 lots out there. All of them have to be infrastructured at some point in time. Whereas you could find monies to create new roads. The issue of water, there's a finite amount of water available. And I think we're seeing more and more that there's a demand for water. We have in these huge developments, as you know. They're coming to the country. And so we have to look at water from a different point of view. Where do we get water? How do we access water? But apart from the big developments, I want to suggest that where the individual takes a greater responsibility is how we consume water. But even beyond the actual consumption of water, I noticed that a lot of homes, it's not mandatory to bring in, to put in a cistern or a water catchment. So I think we have to reach that point where it becomes mandatory.
Okay, so we were scheduled to take a break, but since I invited the callers to call, we're going to go. I think we have a couple of calls on the line, so let's go ahead and take them, and we'll take notes. We'll take our break a little bit later. Good evening, caller. Welcome to the round table.
Good evening. Very informative discussion.
Thank you.
The issue of the cost of public infrastructure. The dollars and cents gentleman there said that because of our situation, we can't access loans at the moment and we won't look forward to grants. But it's a basic principle of infrastructure development that these capital projects will be funded through borrowing. We could be creative. We could take out bonds specifically for something. So, for example, if you want to build a new road somewhere, we issue a bond specifically for that road. And when that bond is paid off, that road window is paid for, rather than going into the general borrowing principle. Secondly, and by the way, our debt situation didn't come about because we built too many public buildings or we have too much infrastructure. It was irresponsible borrowing in the first place. On the subject of public projects, I am very dissatisfied that there seems to be no evident public consultation for many of our major public projects. For example, we have a solar farm being built at what I call the Central Bank Roundabout. I am unaware that the public was ever consulted in any broad way about the location of this site, about why it should be there. There may have been discussions within ministries But we are told that this is the aquifer for the Bastille Valley. And now we are pouring concrete and other things in order to facilitate something which I think aesthetically is in the wrong place and for other reasons in the wrong place. But was the public consulted in any broad way to say, what do you think about putting a solar farm at that point? With regards to our drains and our public buildings, how do we expect them buildings to be maintained in any fashion over the long run when the basic daily cleaning of these buildings is at such a pathetically low standard? You walk into buildings and the lamps and the shelves are coated in not dust but dirt and things like that. So if they're not clean on a daily basis as far as hygiene is concerned, do you expect them to be maintained as far as their structural integrity is concerned over time? And so I could ask 5 more issues, just one that sticks out. When one goes around Keys Corner, as we said, on the way to Keon, a drain was created about a year or so ago. And there's a block of concrete painted yellow sticking out in the road. I would trust that before Mr. Williams, on one of his journeys to Molyneux, should break his wheel rim on it, that he will arrange to have it redesigned so that motorists can safely traverse that part of the road. Good subject, very informative. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you very much for your call. Okay, we do have another call. Good evening, caller. Welcome to the round table.
Yes, good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Yeah, I have a suggestion for Mr. Williams, because I realized he mentioned that he didn't know certain things happening. What he probably could do is have a weekly radio program where he feeds information to the general public, and in turn he would get information from the public as to what needs to be done and so forth. The other thing is that I hope you realize that the smelly water thing is moving from in the east and heading westwards. At one point you couldn't smell it past the police station. Now it's coming further west. So if something could be done to rectify the problem, we will be glad.
All right. Thank you very much for your call. We're going to take this one more call, last one, and then we take a break. Okay, my producers are forcing me tonight. Good evening, caller. Welcome to the round table.
Good evening. I too are concerned about the lack of public participation in major projects. It's done in larger countries where before there's any major project, the persons who are going to be impacted are definitely consulted. I don't think, too, that there's enough facilities for people to report problems. I myself have called Public Works, for instance, and you speak to a secretary, and there's no follow-up. So there should definitely be more opportunities to make sure that your concerns are dealt with. With regard to the drainage system, before we even go to spending large sums of money on major works, sewage works, a simple solution could be to set up something like strainers where the ends of the drains drain into the Astia waterfront and maintain these. And this would help a lot with the unsightly bottles and plates and that sort of thing that spill into the Bastia roadstead. Those are my main concerns.
Thank you very much for your call, raising some very important issues tonight. What we're going to do, though, is we're going to take a break, and we're going to come back and head to our, we're going to deal with our home stretch. I mean, every time we have these shows, we ask, oh my God, 2 hours, it's a long time. But we're 23 minutes away, and I'm not sure we're going to get to address all the issues and the concerns that we have. But we'll take this break, hear from the folks again at Brimstone Hill, and be back on the flip side.
Explore the history of St. Kitts with a visit to the Brimstone Hill Fortress National Park. This 42-acre complex of fortifications has been designated a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Upon entering the fortress, you can choose to visit the gift shop and orientation center, where you can purchase unique, high-quality items at duty-free prices. Or you can look in on the Fort George Museum, which boasts a collection of military and other exhibits unrivaled in the Eastern Caribbean. The breathtaking view of Brimstone Hill includes the mountain range and a view of several other islands on a clear day, and of the Sandy Point Bay that the fortress once defended. Visit us and really experience the history of St. Kitts. This venue will also lend an indescribable ambience to your wedding or banquet.
Want to get the latest news and information on demand? Check out zizonline.com. Our website is updated daily to bring you all the latest local, regional, and international news. Gone abroad and miss home? Check out zizonline.com for our live streams and uploaded local content. We're also on Facebook. Like our page and receive photos, info, and updates directly on your newsfeed. Living on the go? Then our new mobile website can work for you. Visit zizonline.com and get all the information you need on your phone's browser. zizonline.com, reaching you wherever you are.
Welcome back to the roundtable. We had another set of interesting callers. Aaron, we haven't heard from you for a while. Somebody was challenging your statement earlier about not being able to afford loans at this particular point. So they say, what about bonds?
Well, that is an interesting idea. It's something really for the Ministry of Finance to look into and consider. So I would not get too detailed into that. With regard to the loans, it's a situation where the government took a path to deliberately reduce the loan portfolio. So in line with the debt reduction plan. In terms of consulting the public, this is largely done at the ministry level. So whichever ministry is proposing the project or developing the project, they're usually some type of consultation done, whether it be a sports stadium or a community center or a road. There's usually some interaction with the public. At the government level as a whole, there are also other fora in terms of consultations on the economy, etc., that the private sector and NGOs can attend and give feedback as to the development plan. So that's what I'll say about that. The issue of the bonds to finance a project, that is something that the Ministry of Finance can.
But it's an option, though.
Correct. But what if? I don't know. If anything of that would, come here, like in Houston, and most of the U.S. states, you hear about the building of these stadiums, and they put a particular tax or something in place for that period for you to pay. So, for instance, when they're building the whatever, it's the basketball stadium or the new football stadium in Houston, when you come in and you rent a car as an outsider, you have to pay a particular tax that goes to funding the stadium.
Well, I'm sure all these are creative options, right?
There's also the issue of public-private partnership, and that is something that is very common these days.
Correct.
Matter of fact, if you think of Port Zante, that can be classified as public-private partnership. I think the basic model was that Matalon Group and some others would have invested along with the government, the reclamation of the land and the construction of the pier itself would have been so it was definitely some private partnership involved.
I don't think
there.
that they floating of bonds has been a practice in the. I don't know it to be a practice in the Caribbean, but I think as we move away from needing to have loans, we have to begin to look at all of these other options as real options.
Yeah.
And I like the idea, actually. I mean, it's maybe something that we could continue to look at, because there are quite a lot of public sector projects that still need to be addressed, because as we continue to advance, we are demanding more and more and more. Of course, the money has to come from somewhere, and we have to pay some taxes as well. And
Yeah.
there's no free lunch. And as you know, all the people complain about paying a lot of taxes. We don't pay a lot of taxes here, direct or indirect, and that's the reality.
Well, if they think that way, they need to go to Houston and rent a
boy.
car. Because sometimes the car, the cost of the daily cost of the car is less than the taxes.
Pay your way.
Mr. Abidi, you wanted to get in because someone was challenging the consultation process.
Let me say here that in as much as the public consultation aspect is not mandatory, I feel that it is needed. It is something that we need to give serious consideration to. Major projects, they cannot be hidden. So if they're going to affect people's life, the natural thing is to at least let the public know, give the public an idea as to what is coming and
how it affects them.
And how it will affect them. Let me say here, though, that experience in St. Kitts, I hope that, as time goes by, will change. That when we have consultation on activities of this nature, I find that the turnout is usually low. And I'm not saying that that's a reason for not doing it, but that is something that we have noticed. But let me stress here that I think that there is indeed a need for public consultation. You're doing projects that are going to affect people's lives, projects that you're going to be seeing. You can't hide them. So you might as well let the public have an input.
Okay.
Just to add,
Bear with me 1 second, Cromwell. I think we have one more call on the line. Let's take a couple more calls, and then we'll try to pull it all together and wrap it up for the night. Good evening, caller. Welcome.
Good evening. I was listening to Mr. Williams, I think it was, and he said about the homeless billing system. It is quite fine, but what about the government building some more reservoirs and drilling some wells?
Okay, so you're referring to the water situation.
Water situation.
Yes.
And by now, we should have had more wells drilled and more reservoirs. A lot of housing projects signed up, but no water provided for them.
Okay. Thank you very much for your call. I think we're going to address this. We have another call?
Oh, yes. Mr. O'Garo?
Yes.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Also, good evening to the other panelists, especially my good friend, Mr. Williams.
Well,
Special good evening to you, sir.
We have two Mr. Williams here.
Oh, the architect. And good evening to all of the listeners to the program. Mr. O'Garo.
Yes, sir.
I think that all of the panelists would know that to effect any worthwhile development, there ought to be plans and designs in place. And I am of the view that for the future development of our country, a development plan should already have been in place.
But we do have.
A lot of people seemingly bash the people who brought the sugar industry to our country. But yet, many of us pride ourselves in the heritage that we of today have inherited from it. For example, the infrastructure by way of the island main roads see the roads to almost every development in agriculture and also to residential areas, to name a few. So on the sugar, that was the norm. While we today have benefited from the past in a positive way, we now are required to formulate and to execute our own plans with a sense of pride that benefits us in this so-called modern era in which we live. Now, when I look at the McMahon plan of yesteryear, when I was in the estate management, which lets out the positions of the sugar estates around the island with roads and estate yards, residential areas and the like, I worry that with the loss of the sugar industry and there is no more development plan on paper, when most of the estate roads are now being closed up. Now, for the tourist industry, another important aspect I wish to point out is that tall chimney in the Ponds Estate area near the Seventh-day Adventist School. I deem that chimney to be a good tourist attraction, and I think it should be considered. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much for your call as well and raising some important points. I think we have 2 calls. We're going to take these 2 calls and then we're going to try to get back to the panelists. Good evening, caller. Welcome to the roundtable.
Is this my time?
Yes, it is.
Yes, good night.
Good night.
During the course of the program, a number of items came up. Most recently, the one about public consultation. But there were some others, for instance, the use of sprinkler systems and the question of meeting certain standards and requirements. Now, I'm glad that Mr. Victor Williams is on the program as well. Can he say whether or not this project that was said to be of 8 stories is still going to proceed, and what are the conditions that he can safely indicate to us that surround that project? Because this so-called 8-story project is right above the aquifer, and I'm not aware that there was any public consultation at all. So I'm wondering if that project is still going to proceed. And on the question of standards, Victor was one who was instrumental in setting up the building guidelines late 70s and early 80s, along with a chap called John Lewis. Now, that had in certain features, like setbacks, not only from roads, but from the high water mark. There's a building over at Frigate Bay, and I'm not trying to put anyone on the spot. I'm just trying to get some indication of what happened. There's a building that infringed the provisions to be set back from the high water mark. I'll stop here and see if we can get some answers. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your call. We're going to make this our final call for the evening. Good evening, caller. Welcome to the roundtable.
Hi, good evening.
Good evening.
Good night to the panelists.
Good night.
I think it's a very interesting program that you're all having.
Thank you.
I am one who believes that such programs are very important because at least you can allow for different thoughts and different ideas to come to the table. And what is more important is whether or not we can take the suggestions and put them into practical use, because many times we have these programs and the ideas come, but you are not seeing any implementation of these ideas.
Yes.
I recognize that the panelists, they are writing and they are putting down notes, but I hope that they now go back to the drawing board and put these ideas into operation. I want to speak specifically to the issue of road occupancy, because I realize that residents are going up over St. Kitts, and these owners are not making any provision for vehicles or their vehicles to park off the road. And so you have situations where roads are basically blocked up. And in the event that, we might have an emergency. Let's say, for instance, if we look at
a project, and this is just one project out of many. The project at Newtown, right? I mean, you just have 3 roads going across there, just above the playing field. And I mean, these roads are blocked up. If you have an emergency across there, you have a problem in getting, let's say, a fire truck across there.
You're referring to Ponds Extension?
Ponds, right.
Yes, okay.
But then you have this situation replicated all about in St. Kitts, because you find that people are building, have enough yard space, but they're putting a fence across, and no provision is made for vehicles to park in their yard. And we are going into a situation where you have tenants, and so no provision for tenants to park in their yard. I believe this is something that the building and planning department can address and can enforce. One of the problems I'm finding in St. Kitts is that we know the theory, and I listen Edwin, and I listen all of you guys, and you all are good on the theory. But when it comes to the practical application and the enforcement of these theories, somebody backing off, because, you know, you don't want Peter Brown to go and tell somebody who they know that might be a little bit higher than you in government, that, listen me, I get squeezed from Mr. Edmead, and so you don't want to go that way. You don't want to challenge the status quo. Too many times, we send people off to study, they come back here, they know the theory, and they do not have the backbone to put this theory into practice. They don't have the backbone to stand up and make these laws applicable or implement them, because they are considering their job more than anything else. Right? It's time that we move forward, because we have a developing country, and it's out of our ideas, it is out of our implementation, it is out of how we execute our jobs that will advance the country from where we are to where we are going. And I want our people in these senior positions to have backbone. Governments come and go, and it doesn't matter. We have a responsibility to build our country, irrespective of who government is in place. So that is something I want us to take on board. Be strong in your job. Execute your job the way it's supposed to be done, in spite of whatever pressure you think over you. God is the one who gives us a daily bread, not man. So we can show off all the thoughts about, I mean, if I might lose my job, if I'm strict in implementing whatever laws or codes that are in place. Thirdly, the question of public consultation. I think we should have more of that, and be very selective with the forum, because, you know, many times you go into a hall or community center and you don't really get much response. But if you come on the ear, like I said, properly advertise, I mean, you will get a wide cross-section of the general public participating, and you can take ideas from that. So maybe the way how we do it, we can change that. For example, we have in the construction of the road in Frigate Bay, across Frigate Bay, going into the Southeast Peninsula. Did we do much public consultation? I don't know. But I'm seeing some lacking, and I believe that the contribution that you can get from the community with regard to certain things you can do with this road would be important, because I'm not seeing a sidewalk. People walk across there every minute. I'm not too sure whether or not that was taken into consideration. I'm not seeing a drain. I'm not sure if that was taken into consideration. You know, certain things that are happening across there, I believe that if you allow for the public to contribute, you can get more done, and you can get a better end product. That's my contribution for now.
Thank you very much for your contribution, some salient points, and you did it with passion. And that's what we like here on the round table. Well, we're almost out of time, and my producers telling me that they're ready to go, because we have a very busy week this week. Starting tomorrow, you know, the CDB Board of Governors meeting is here, and ZIZ is going to do major coverage. So we'll get to answering some of these questions and addressing some of the concerns from the callers, and we'll call this the wrap-up as well. So we'll go with you first, Mr. Edmead.
Okay, Mr. Moderator, thank you. And just in the interest of time, I'll just touch on some of these quickly. Now, we do have a National Physical Development Plan. That question was asked. Yes, we do have a National Physical Development Plan, and our land use is rolled out largely in accordance to that plan. Okay? The issue of estate roads yes, some have become overgrown, but these roads are not abandoned, because what I can say is that in terms of approving development plan, wherever these roads are, they are factored into the plans. In fact, if a plan come in and the survey document is showing that a road was in this place and it is blocked off, it is taken out, unless an alternative is provided, then that will be highlighted and it has to change. So we do look out for them. The 8-story project, that is interesting. No such project has been approved. What happened is that as a publicity stunt, the developers went and put out such information, and we even had to write them and had them correct this. No such project has been approved, and we have our eye on it. It's I mean, as was correctly said, it's close to the aquifer, so it is one that we are looking at closely, and to ensure that, I mean, the standards are maintained there by way of environmental impact assessment, etc.
Great.
Road occupancy, yes, that matter was brought to me, and I know the gentleman who brought it up, and I agree wholeheartedly with what he said. But just to say though, that all aspects are not covered in terms of that, but indeed there are provisions, there are parking provisions for development. For instance, if you're going to build an apartment complex, you must provide parking for your occupants. The housing developments though, that the one which he would have highlighted, I think that one would have been sometime before, and we are seeing the effects of not putting certain provisions in place.
That was the Ponds extension one that he mentioned. He is so right, because every time you drive through, there's so many cars, you can hardly get by.
But it is something that we are going to take on board, the need to provide parking facilities for private homes, especially government projects. The average household now has at least one vehicle, so you cannot ignore that. You must take it on board.
And people have to recognize as well too that, I mean, you can't always park in front of the door of the place that you're going to. It's healthy to walk. Go ahead.
Very quickly,
Victor,
because we're running out of time. I wanted to respond to the lady who spoke about the need for more reservoirs. And I said, yes, there's a need for more reservoirs, but however, if we don't change the way we use water, we will continue to waste the water. And I think some of us is almost bordering on being criminal in the way we use water. So if we use water wisely, we would not need to spend as much money building systems. So although I say, yes, we need more systems, from my point of view, I think it's more important that we learn how to use water differently, and we have to start putting our own catchments for water. That's one.
That's the thing, Mr. Williams.
Yeah.
Catchments.
Right.
Building a reservoir,
And
you still have to
too.
collect the water
That is correct.
to put in there. What we need is harvesting, catching that water, and that is where we have to put
And I
our
want to
emphasis.
answer my good friend Willie Liebert. he doesn't mind if I call his name. Because it is true that I created the development guidelines for Frigate Bay, and I'm very proud of it. He spoke about this building that was built near the high water mark, and I will say, without evasion, equivocation, or any mental reservation, it was a mistake. We had nothing to do with it. The Development Control and Planning Board was not involved with Frigate Bay at that point in time. We're now, the board has now taken over all of these areas, but when that went up, it was a mistake, and nature will deal with that.
All right. RN, your contribution.
Yes, well, I will touch on the area of sensitization of the public. Consultation public-private sector partnerships. It's all related. What our ministry has sought to work on is that the public needs to be sensitized as to the major capital projects that would be coming next year, 2 years from now, etc. So whereas you can actually go on one of the government websites and pick up what projects pertain for this year. For example, we all know the Southeast Peninsula Road is being done. That is something anyone can access. I think it's the Ministry of Finance website. What the Ministry of Sustainable Development would be seeking to do in the near future is to sensitize the public as to what is going to happen in year 2, what is going to happen in year 3. So even this year, the private sector, NGOs, if they want to participate in public infrastructure in projects in terms of financing projects, if they want to increase their level of consultation on these projects, it all starts with sensitization. Right. So as at this year, you would be able to look forward and see, okay, in 2018, there's going to be development of Sandy Point Bypass Road, etc., and you can sort of craft your business plan around that. So this is something that, other territories, OECS territories, Caribbean countries are moving towards in terms of sensitization. So this is going to be a first step in involving the public a little more. In terms of the pace of public infrastructure, I think we should be relatively optimistic about the pace of public infrastructure as it is right now. We are at least comparable or beyond some of many of our sister territories. So, we encourage the public to be patient at the same time, understanding that there has been, a global downturn in the past few years, which would have decreased the government's ability to raise revenue to implement capital projects. So coming out of that, the outlook right now is a lot better than it was a few years ago, and the pace of capital projects will start increasing. And as I said, we would start to sensitize the private sector and the general community as to those projects down the road.
Thank you. And Mr. Cromwell Williams, the Director of Public Works, you get the opportunity to bring it all home for us this evening on the round table.
Thank you, Mr. Ogaro, and I would want to end where I began by first thanking you and ZIZ for affording us this opportunity to come to the public tonight to discuss the important topic of public infrastructure and how do we and can we afford to maintain and to improve the standard of our public infrastructure. I want to also end on a public relations note, and one of the callers did give me some friendly advice, which is it's as simple as having a regular program in the media. Police, traffic does it, solid waste does it, quite a number of government departments.
You say the media, I say on ZIZ.
On ZIZ, okay. starting with ZIZ. And I've always felt strongly, as most persons would know, that not too long ago I wore a different cap as the water manager, and I felt very strongly then that this is something that is necessary, and it is equally necessary as public works. Public Works Department. It is the people's business that we are managing facilities, we are managing assets, we are managing the country's resources on behalf of the people, and we need to have that direct contact and dialogue with the people. And so that is one thing that I intend to pursue going forward, is to provide that avenue where we can, where persons can, we can hear from persons, and that is one of the reasons behind this evening's discussion, really. So I want to thank my fellow panelists as well for joining us, and thank the public.
All right, well, I want to thank you guys for coming in and giving us so much information, also to the callers as well. We know they had a lot of questions, concerns, issues, and that's what the roundtable is all about. We will be back next week. We're going to take a look. We have a couple of different topics. We're going to look at some travel-related issues. We're going to do some agri, processing, and a couple of different other topics. After that, we'll take a break, of course, for CPL and the St. Kitts Music Festival and Culturama and all that good stuff before we come back again to close out the second half of the year. I hope that you enjoyed our show tonight. Hope that you learned something new. We'll see you next week at 8 o'clock on the round table. Have a good evening.
Good evening.
Hail, I love I, come to Builders Paradise. Hail, I love I, number one in product, service, and price.
Better prices.
Blowout sale on 6 cubic yard wheelbarrows, now only $284.99. Blowout sale on 20 millimeters and 25 millimeters conduit pipe, starting at $5.99. Blowout sale on standard fans, just $99.45. Blowout sale on rough stuff 42-gallon contractor bags, $46.80. Blowout sale on interior doors, only $40.95. Complete toilet sets including seat, just $393.12. Special discount on certain types of paints.
Lumber, plywood, plumbing, and hardware. All things for tiling. Builders Paradise, where island dreams begin.
At a better price.
At Builders Paradise, we are proud to sing.
Prompt and free delivery, all you do just tell us where. All to show that Builders Paradise cares.